Welcome back to Broche Banter. I'm Julie, your host. This is your home for thought-provoking conversations about what it means to pursue ballet in adulthood. In this inspiring episode, we are thrilled to welcome Kimberly Wilson, a two-time gold medal winner at IABF and a true beacon of passion for ballet. Join us as we delve into her journey of returning to ballet as an adult in 2018, reigniting her childhood passion. Kimberly shares her insights on overcoming the initial challenges that many beginners face, from feeling defeated in a beginner class to navigating the complexities of hyperflexibility and the occasional left-right mix-up. We explore the benefits of live online classes and private lessons, discussing how finding the right teacher and the right environment makes all the difference. She reminds us that progress in ballet often takes us 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Join us for an uplifting conversation that encourages you to take the center stage in your own life. And with that, here is the fabulous episode with Kimberly. Welcome to the show, Kimberly. I'm so excited to have you on Broche Banter today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's a treat to connect.
I am so excited to talk with you about all things ballet. You started ballet it's become a few years now, but it's still in the recent past. So how long has it been, Kimberly?
So I did ballet through, I guess, junior high, like grade school, junior high. And then I dabbled in some like 12-week courses or a class here and there. So maybe like 15 classes total in adulthood until 2018. And I had been in Paris in 2017 and went to Versailles and I saw Beauty and the Beast. But it was just so stunning that I was home that night and Googling, my Airbnb, my pretend home, and Googling adult ballet because I was just blown away. I was like, how is this not part of my everyday life? So January 2018, I went to a class at Washington Ballet that was incredibly, incredibly hard. It was beginner, but it was like not beginner. Yeah. And then that was the journey. But when I found you in 2020, Julie, thank God I found you, A, and B, it really got me into pretty much a daily practice, which has been so lovely between you and some other online classes, and then finding someone to start doing privates with, which was also very helpful.
So helpful. So helpful. That's a big leap to take from from watching the show and then deciding to do it. So I guess you had already been dabbling in and out of the studio. Why did you not keep up with it at those times when you were dabbling? Was it too much? Were you too busy? Like what was keeping you to only those 15 until 2018?
Yeah, 15 classes within like 25, 30 years.
Yeah. So what was that about?
I know. I was very big into yoga, right? I had a couple yoga studios and I did yoga pretty much every day. Yep. And I would go to these ballet classes that were beginner or were, a 12-week course where you would go through the beginning stages. And they were just always so hard. I left feeling defeated. And that's not really a fun way to feel.
No.
I don't learn choreography quickly, the beginner classes, I think they expected you to know some basics, which I totally understand. I knew the basics when I was 8, right? But not so much when I was like 48. So it was hard to like really hold on to it. But there was something that clicked for me, even though I've gone to see ballets many times over the year. But that day at Versailles, that night at Versailles, it was like Christmas Eve, I think. And I was like, just moved to tears, And I was like, I need this. I need this in my life. I had sold the yoga studios, was still doing yoga regularly, but was shifting out of it a bit, not consciously, but it was happening. And so then I just fell in love with ballet. It's nice returning to childhood passions.
Yeah. So was it a passion when you were young? So from like 8 until 12, you loved it. You loved the clothes and the class and everything.
Yeah, I would say probably from 8 until maybe 15.
Okay, a little longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get point shoes at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you did. You did the whole thing. You went pretty far. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You say, and so many people say, I don't pick up choreography quickly. I want to know who are the people who do.
They do. I see them in class.
Yeah, but they're like, what's their background? How are they them? Because they're not the people that I meet. They're not the people who I see in class, right? Like the people who actually started from the beginning. Learning choreography is really tough. It's like learning how to speak. It's like when you kind of know French, but then you go to France and it's like, whoa, that's like knowing a few words and like talking it slowly with your good friend is very different from going to a foreign country and having to understand and speak the language. It's a whole different fluency that's required. It's a whole different thing. Yeah, it's so interesting how a beginner class can make you feel defeated in ballet and can give you that feeling. I think many of our listeners will relate to that who've gone to a beginner workshop and a beginner class. And there's so many potential reasons for it. One is everyone's coming at ballet from a very different starting point as an adult, right? Some are coming from 15 classes, some are coming from years or decades or whatever's going on. And I think it's so interesting when you think about the perspective of teaching beginners, how many things a teacher forgets that you don't know. Like how many things are like, oh, right. That would be, oh, right. They may not know this. Oh, right. There's so many details for a beginner, for somebody learning from the very beginning. It's crazy. What was the, do you have a sense of what was the more difficult thing for you to pick up? Because you already have a lot of flexibility from the yoga. You already have a good amount of strength. Like that part maybe wasn't so much where you struggled, but what do you have a sense of what was the difficult part for you?
Totally. The combinations. So even at the bar, right? It's like I've gotten better, but I really would struggle if there were like more than a few things that were done in
Yeah.
the combo to then remember, or I always panic when frappes are thrown in. And then center, I swear my mind goes blank.
Yep.
And you would think like, oh, everyone struggles with choreography, right? But having been in person back in a studio in person this year for the first time, really since the pandemic, I was like, no, there are people out there who they get it. I mean, people who they just like, they see it once and they can do it. Whereas
Right.
I've seen it and there's just no way I can replicate it. I only remember the first step. So I just chassé all the way across the floor, even though that was like step 1 of 5. And I
Right.
was like, how do these people know it? But I would talk to them about it because I'm like, well, how do you do it? And they're people who have danced in other forms of dance before. So
Yeah.
they just somehow it clicks where it doesn't click for me for a long time.
Right. It's almost like they've got different patterns already in their body that they
Yes.
can just draw from. Whereas if you're coming fresh, you have no patterns. There's no patterns to draw from. You just know about walking left and right and left and right and up onto a curve and then down off of a curve and that
Right.
sort of a thing. It's a whole different thing. It's like when I am in a singing lesson, my teacher can hear a song and sing it back. And I'm like, how did you do that? It's going to take me about 50 times in 8 weeks of hearing you sing it slowly for me to even repeat three of those notes back to you.
Yes. Yes.
This is very tough. What is it like? What is it like when you're in the center and your mind goes blank? I mean, maybe now you've got some coping mechanisms there, but what was it like in the beginning? And for anything you might offer for someone else in that boat where they're in those beginning stages and they're like, "Oh, this is awful. I'm so bad at this."
Well, what was interesting is when I first started and I was across the center for, I guess, like a couple years right before the pandemic hit and across like, studio centers, right, which is quite different than my living space. I was having fun with it and I was like, okay, whatever, right? I was doing what I could. And it wasn't one of those things that was quite as traumatic small t as it was for me this year. And I think
Mm-hmm.
going into the Washington Ballet experience and, rehearsing for a performance, we had 3 in June. I thought that I would be going into this, and I've been practicing diligently for 6 years, like
Yep.
a lot. So surely I'll be fine. And then just to see, other people just get
Mm-hmm.
it and me just kind of, that was really hard on me because I guess I had a different level of expectation from myself
Mm-hmm.
than I did previously. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just fun. Actually, it wasn't fun at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
But here in center, it's different. There's not a huge mirror, there's not bright lights. I don't feel exposed to others the
Right.
same way you do in a studio setting. But I say all that not to want people to feel defeated. I think it's really important to go,
Yeah.
but also recognize expectations of just like, okay, just because you've been doing it for years, it doesn't mean that even a beginner level is not going to challenge you. And it was hard. It was hard for me.
Yeah. And, I think the word humbling is a popular word to say like it was a humbling experience, but nobody talks about how painful it is to be humbled. It's very painful. It's not a fun experience. And the blow to the ego is killer when you go in and someone says this is going to be easy or simple or whatever. The teacher is like, let's do an easy combination. And they give some crazy thing. And you think, oh my goodness, this can't be the easy combination. Like, I'm not getting this. That expectation is so tough. Um, the expectations of easefulness or grandeur that should be better than you already are. These are so tough. These are so tough to work through. So coming back from that, you did not give up though. You kept going at pretty much your same pace. I mean, you obviously had the next festival to prepare for, to prepare performance wise, but what kept you going after that tough experience? Because that could have been a moment to make or break and be like, oh my goodness, I'm not cut out for this. I'm just done with this right now.
Well, the good thing is I knew what to contrast it to, which is you and the
Mm,
experience I have at Broche, right? And particularly at the Adult Ballet Festival,
yeah.
because it's freaking night and day. If I
Yeah.
had just had that experience or, returned to that experience after time away from the studio, just during the pandemic, I would not have continued. It was really like, it was so jarring. So that was February through June, from
Yeah.
auditions to like rehearsals to performances. So really what helped get me through it, honestly, is my weekly privates with Sean. Basically,
Yeah.
the first 30 minutes was ballet therapy.
Oh, and you're like, I
I'd
can't
be
do
like,
it.
I'd be like, and this happened, and then what the hell is a chasse? And it's like these things, but when
Yeah.
you're stuck in the middle, you're put in the middle and just like expected. Somehow I just shut down. So yeah, it was like ballet therapy. It really helped
Yeah.
keep me going. And knowing you and the International Adult Ballet Festival was on the other side, right?
Mm.
That totally kept me going.
Yeah. So you're like, this is temporary. This is not how it always
Yes.
will be. This is not the only way. I'll be fine. Yeah, that's such a tough experience. Luckily, you're a trooper. And the love
Or a
of ballet
glutton.
isn't there. Yeah, or a glutton, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Ballet is such a trap, though. We can't exactly leave it, but sometimes it's very torturous.
It's really hard. Yeah.
It's
But
really hard.
fun.
Wink, wink. So, okay, so people, newcomers to ballet who listen and they think, oh, that sounds so fun. Let's say someone had their own version of watching Beauty and the Beast and falling in love with ballet. What these blockers will come up for people in the very beginning times, like this anxiety of getting started. I mean, when I was running my Denver studios, I would meet people who said they've had the ballet shoes sitting in their closet for 2 years before they worked up the courage to come to that very first class with me. And who knows how many people didn't work up the courage to come to that first class and still have their ballet shoes sitting in the closet, sitting there waiting. How do you get started? How do you get started in ballet in this environment, knowing that, kind of some of these things can be a little tricky?
I think it's really helpful to have the online option. I do plan to go back to a studio to Washington Ballet, certain teachers. Once my hip is healed, and I'm given the green light, maybe like once a month or a couple times a month, right? I really like the online experience. It fits into my schedule. And I think for listeners who are a little fearful about going into the studio, I remember for yoga, people would be like, where do I go? Where do I put my shoes? All the things where you're just uncomfortable the first few times. And so it's similar with ballet, but at home, you just open your laptop and make sure you have a tiny bit of space. You really don't need much.
Right.
And some shoes or like ballet slippers or socks, can work, I think, at the beginning and to just be gentle with yourself to know like this is very hard, but it's also so delightful and empowering and it feels so good, but it also is hard like mentally. You have to really focus and that can be hard for a lot of us who are great at multitasking, right?
Yeah, and you let the mind go to many different thoughts and topics. When when someone's thinking about getting started, sometimes people worry about the online or the home experience that they're not being supervised or that they, might be learning it wrong accidentally or developing, kind of bad habits with it. Have you experienced any of that or any of those kind of thoughts in your head? What is your experience with that having started? I mean, obviously you did start some in person, but the bulk of your training the last few years has been in the home environment. So what is your experience with those kind of anxieties or worries?
Well, it's funny because I think in the studio you can get no feedback also, so it's
Yeah.
not like, oh, well, if I go to a studio, then I'll get personal feedback. I'd say if you want really personal feedback, you do private lessons, right? But I
That's
know
true.
that's not in everyone's resources. So, the big thing I find with online classes is taking from teachers who do acknowledge, because right for a while there was hybrid, so I mean, there still is some live and online, and sometimes they don't pay attention to online,
Right.
right? But there are some teachers who do and are very good at it, and it's a lot of juggling for them. And so, finding teachers where you are getting feedback.
Mhm.
And, I think that's the beauty of live classes, because if you were to just watch all your wonderful videos, you're not getting in the moment feedback from the teacher. And not that you're focused on me the entire class, right? But you're not getting the feedback that you can in a live class. So I would really encourage listeners. I mean, if they want to start with the videos, great. It's a wonderful resource. But I think if you really want to get started with it, like begin with a virtual class.
Mhm.
Or if you want to go to a studio, make sure it's someone who is encouraging and loving, which is not the norm, I think, for ballet teachers, at least the
Yeah.
way traditionally trained in the day. And that doesn't work for my nervous system, right? Whereas some people, I think that they're fine with it. They're not quite as sensitive.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like recognizing what works for you, what feels good for you. I
Mhm.
don't return to classes where it didn't feel good. And, just recognizing that it's a slow growth. It's really
Mhm.
slow. And I feel like, even though it's like, oh, I've been doing it 6 years, I'm gonna be fine. And then I was so humbled um, that it was also like recognizing sometimes I feel like it's two steps forward, one step back. So it's not just like, oh, I keep getting better. I think with ballet, it's like it's a journey, it is a journey,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And, the teacher makes such a big difference on the experience you have in class. And I think there's, uh, you should separate the teacher from ballet. Like the teacher is not the same as ballet. Like ballet is a very different experience depending on who teaches you. And I think those moments where you do get a teacher who is a little bit more traditional, a little bit more harsh, or who moves too quickly, or whatever their style is that doesn't work for you, those are the moments where it's easy to be like, this isn't for me. But you should instead say, this teacher isn't for me. Not ballet isn't for me, but it's like this teacher or this environment or this way of learning ballet is not for me. Not like ballet as a whole is not for me. Because I think people can conflate those and say, this makes me feel bad, therefore I can't do ballet, or like, therefore my body is not cut out for ballet, or like generalize it to all of ballet. And I think those moments of exploration in the beginning take a lot of courage, because you have to continually put yourself out there to try a new environment and maybe feel bad in that environment, and then try another environment and maybe maybe have a difficult experience. But keeping going, knowing that each teacher provides a very different experience in ballet. And there's so many gems out there, both in person and, like you said, even at the one studio, there's gems within that studio of people who are going to be kind of the right fit. So you have to kind of try and not say that environment was bad, therefore ballet is bad, or therefore I'm bad at ballet, or therefore like I have to quit. Like those sort of generalizations, I think, where we get in trouble in the beginning and kind of leave the studio prematurely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
hang in there is what Julie's saying. And I agree. And yeah, seek out those who you feel good when you
Yeah.
are in the class and when you leave the class. No,
Yeah.
it's not good to leave in tears. And
No.
that happens. It can happen if
Yeah.
it's the wrong teacher.
Yeah, we've all
Yeah.
been there.
Yeah.
I think most of us have been there where we've left a class crying. Sometimes the teacher did their best, but it was still a humbling experience. But those tears, they don't mean that you can't do ballet. They don't mean you won't learn it. They're just that experience was a tough one on your journey. Um, why do you think ballet is two steps forward and one step back? Tell me more about that experience for you. What's the step back that keeps happening that people might wonder? What is that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. During my time at Washington Ballet this year, I remember like Googling do you get worse the more you do something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a time like where that happens? And I forget what the answer was, but I think it was that some people do plateau,
Mhm.
or, and it doesn't mean you will forever, but there's times, right, where you're not progressing. And I think too, particularly when you really get in your head, and that was happening in that experience. And so that's why I say two steps forward, one step back, because I think personal growth, honestly, is like that.
Mm.
We're not like always just going up, right? We fall back into patterns. We forget to, flex our foot well enough and frappe, these things that it's like, I mean, if we tried to do every detail we've learned in a class, I think our heads would explode. It's just so much,
Right.
right? So that's where it's like maybe you're working on, I don't know, your plies, right, for a while. And then you take on a pirouette. And I know that's a big leap, but, just thinking about what are the pieces that you really want to work on versus everything, because it's a lot. And I think
Yeah.
it, really can be overwhelming and beautiful. So I don't want to keep focusing on the overwhelming,
Yeah.
but in case people feel that way, I want them to feel seen.
Right. And when you're in those two steps forward, though, what's that feel like? That's like such a fun
Oh.
feeling.
It's so fun. But it's so funny for me to get those two steps forward. I think it takes so much more than it would other people. Like it's just, I don't know, like my processor's just a little slower and I have to really practice a lot to get things in my body. But it's fun whenever I think of looking at video of when I was first learning my solo for this year's performance. And then when I did it, oh my gosh, it's night and day. I couldn't remember what foot was going in front at the start.
Mhm.
And that was after a few months of working on it. So it's fun to see the progress, but it doesn't just go from there to there linearly for
Yeah.
me.
Um, and what did it feel like once you get to that other side? Like, what was the feeling after you did your solo? And by the way, two-time gold medal winner at the International Adult Ballet Festival for this solo and the one before as well. What did that feel like when your name was called for the gold medal? For how much work you'd put in? I know you don't like watching your video, so maybe you didn't watch your video of the performance afterwards. But how did it feel on the other side of the show?
It felt really good. It was one of those things where when I went up, I just thought to myself, because I'd read this in an article on CNN about um, Olympic athletes, what they say to themselves before they perform. I guess it's called a performance. And anyway, and it's like, I've trained for this, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I was repeating to myself when I got up there. And I'm like, I have spent so many hours on this. It is what it is. Like, it's just whatever comes out, comes out. And so I was really happy afterwards because I felt like I left it all in the field. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I will never do that dance again. I never do my pieces ever again. I'm like, once it's done, once I get off stage, that's it forever. And so it's funny that it's just like such a culmination of 9 to 10 months of work for
Mhm.
like 3 minutes. But
Yeah.
it really feels good. But it doesn't always go that way. I remember last year after dress rehearsal, I was sitting in the audience just in tears. I was so upset. So it doesn't always go great. But I hear if you have a bad dress rehearsal, you have a good performance. That's the
Yes.
word on the street.
That's the word on the street. The good luck. The word on the street is a bad dress means a good show.
Yes, yes.
it's it's kind of like the Olympics, 9 months of training for 3 minutes. I mean, it's very much where they'll do a program, ice skating where they do a program, a runner, they do I guess unless you're running a marathon, it really is a years and years, a lifetime of training for a very short period of time. But it's a good thing it wasn't longer than that because it would be it would be just decades for a 2 hour performance. So it's a good thing it's only 3 minutes, isn't it?
Right. Yes. That's all I have in me.
But the piece came out so delightful, Kimberly. You were wearing this neck scarf. Is this the neck scarf you were wearing in the
Oh,
piece?
it is actually.
Yeah, because you had the cute pink neck scarf with the little beret, and we had the Paris background up on the screen for you, and it was just like
Yes.
delightful. I mean, you probably couldn't see the audience while you were dancing, but everybody was just grinning in the audience watching you. It
Oh,
was just like the most delightful, refreshing piece with even some facial expressions and all kinds of fun stuff. It turned out so great.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have to credit Sean for that because, of course, that was all his choreography and his training. But yeah, it was so fun because I love Paris. I love jazz. I love Edith Piaf. I love that song. So it was like everything I've ever wanted, like all pulled together. So it was, and it's funny, I forgot when I put this on today, I forgot that it is the scarf I was wearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it was. I'm like, I know this scarf from somewhere. Then you're
Yes,
talking about your piece. I'm like, this is the scarf from your piece. I know this
it
from your piece
is.
on stage.
Yes. Oh my gosh, great memory.
um, we when it comes to performing and putting together, like you said, everything you love all in one place. What's that like? Was that a thing in yoga at all? Is that a thing unique to ballet for you where you get to combine things into an expressive sort of nature? Do you have anything else like that in your life? I'm curious what that means, what piece that fulfills for you in your life to be able to put together things into a show or into your own piece that you've created.
I love that question. And the thing about yoga, right, and having been so into it for 20 plus years, there's no performance, right? Of
Mhm.
course, it's like it's a practice. Um, so I mean, I remember we had like a few birthday parties and maybe I do like a 1, 2 minute piece, of some stuff, but it was never, ever like it was never about a performance, which is fine and lovely. But yet there is something about practicing for a performance
Mhm.
that is just, I don't know. I didn't realize that there would ever be an opportunity to perform. And so when I got back into ballet in 2018, again, I didn't think it was possible. And then when I found you in 2020, and I can't remember, it must have been 2021 that you announced the International Adult Ballet Festival. And I was like, uh-huh, like immediately signed up, was so excited. And there is something about being able to showcase something that you've put your heart and soul into. And so another area where I do think this shows up is just my work. So for 19 years now, right? I've been doing a podcast. I've had this clothing line since 2002 that's locally sewn. Like, my writing, all kind of the stuff that I put out into the world. I don't know if I would say it's performance, but it's showcasing and it's sharing
Mhm.
my growth and evolution with others. So I guess that's a way, right? But being able to perform on stage is like, such a unique and beautiful and challenging, experience.
Mhm. Yeah, I heard a really beautiful thing that was, about the meaning and purpose that we get as humans creating art and the sort of development of that really important part of us of having some purpose and having some artistic fulfillment. And it sounds like, I mean, obviously you have many ways to do that, but ballet is like a very unique type of artistic fulfillment, I think.
Absolutely. And it's so funny you even say that because I just recently uh released an episode, a Tea with Kimberly, and these are just videos, but called Take the Stage, right? And it is about how do we, whether or not you really want to be literally on a ballet stage, but how can you take the stage in your own life, right? Like how
Mhm.
can you show up and how can you, express yourself in a way that feels really good to you, whether or not it's a tiara and tutu. Is it like, okay, I'm going to, put my work out into the world in some unique way, or the way I send emails is a unique way? It's like, how can you, listeners, really think about taking the stage in your own life? What does that look like?
Mhm. Yeah, and how do you find that sort of feeling of, like you said, the sharing aspect of it has a big thing to do with it. It's not a personal private practice, but it's a sharing of that growth with people, which can inspire people pretty much to no end to do their own personal growth, which then ripples out into the world. And that sharing aspect really can spark something in somebody.
Yes, for sure.
And it's, yeah, really beautiful. So when you're thinking about practicing for something at the festival, we have the competition option where people can decide if they want to compete or not. Why why do you compete? Why do you like the idea of the competition? Does it help motivate you? Is it fun? Like what is the competition to you? Does it add nerves? Like I'm curious what that experience is for you.
Well, it's so funny. So the first year, and I guess I just assumed or planned to compete all along. I'm not sure. Maybe I remember saying to Tim, actually, maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring. I can't remember, but Sean did not know. And Sean, Kelly, my private teacher, he had done the choreography for it as Lilac Fairy. And so I remember that night, I sent him a photo of maybe the medal or something. And he's like, I didn't even know you were competing. I was like, oh, I guess I forgot to tell you.
Oh my
So
gosh, how funny.
it's
Even
like,
because you worked with him for months. I mean, hours and
I
hours
know.
and hours, and you forgot to tell. Well, you had a lot of things to think about. Left foot, right foot. For
I mean,
Sean.
I don't know why yeah, I don't know why I didn't tell him. And so maybe I did kind of throw my hat in the ring last minute. I'm not sure, but Les Sell Feeds, the when I did my second year, I planned to compete the whole time. I just was like, I'm doing this, right? I was really excited and it was on point. So it was a whole new challenge. But the third year, this last one, I wasn't going to compete. And it was just like, I don't know. I just thought, let me just, perform, right? But then as it was getting closer and I was through the Washington Ballet experience, I was like, maybe this would really motivate me to tighten things up and to take it really seriously, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and practice in between my private sessions, not just show up and go over the same thing over and over again because it still wasn't in my body. And so it was a motivator. I was still going to perform, obviously, but I didn't plan to compete. And then I was like, let me go ahead and throw my hat in the ring. It'll keep me motivated. And I do think that's when things really kind of progressed with that piece.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's so interesting how the stakes really change the process itself.
They do.
Yeah. That's fascinating. It's why I put the competition in there. So it's actually interesting to hear that it has had the effect. Like I know for people who are pursuing ballet in adulthood, sometimes it feels like there's not a point or that it's hard to dedicate the time to their own ballet practice or to put in the work and the effort. And one of the big parts of what I try to do is try to figure out what motivates each individual person. So that's why there's so much variety of different things. Maybe you're motivated by a magazine or by a wall calendar or by artistry classes or by technique classes or by competing or by performing, right? Like you kind of give everyone their own avenue where they can pick and choose their motivation. And it was my suspicion that competition would give for the right person the motivation to be like, this is worth it. I'm going to like give this a real go. And like that it would be sometimes hard to give it a quote unquote real go if you didn't have some reason for it, because sometimes the reason is like, well, yeah, I'm just going to go, I'm just like going to go on stage and it'll be nice and it'll be lovely and it'll be really fun. And that's fine too. That's totally fine too. But like you said, there's something different about adding stakes to it, even if they're like not that, like they're not like, it's not like on the Olympic stage or something, but like the
Right.
stakes are still added where you're putting your hat in the ring for disappointment, for judgment, for critique, for criticism, for a score, for, comparison. You've like added a little stake to it. It's kind of interesting.
It is. I mean, it makes all the difference to me. Who knew, right? Like I
Who
was
knew?
super excited to perform because it's just fun. It's not my
Yeah.
annual recital from when I was 8 because that was kind of the last time that I would perform on stage. And so it was just like, yeah, it made a world of difference. So, but it is interesting what motivates people, right?
Yeah. What what motivates people is just such an interesting question. I think what each person has to figure out what motivates them, and in each activity, I think we have a different motivation. Do you have other motivations for other types of things? Like, do you think a meta would have motivated you in yoga or in writing, or is that kind of unique to ballet? Like, what are the different areas and types of motivations that you found work in other areas?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. With yoga, I mean, it was just like, oh, well, will I be able to hold a headstand, for a while? So there is progress, right? I never got to a handstand and arm balances, all those things were my thing. Like I enjoyed them until I had some injuries.
Yeah.
And then, with writing, it's more of like, okay, well, when am I going to release this? Or when am I going to get the book proposal in to my agent or my editor? And, so there are some milestones, I think is one way to think of this, some milestones along the way that are helpful and motivating and keep me feeling like I'm growing. And probably listeners have that in their lives too,
Yeah.
of how they can grow. You can progress in your career, like you can progress in like being a good parent or family member, so there's so many things, but there's something tangible, right, about being able to see it in your body and or, to deliver something like a performance or a manuscript, if you're
Yeah.
working on a book or something.
Right. That delivery gives it a realness to it.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned the injury piece. That's such an interesting part about learning ballet as an adult. I mean, in youth, you can definitely get injuries too, right? Of course, from overtraining or a lot of training or whatever it is. But one very different thing about learning coming to ballet as an adult is you have your body's already been lived in. Your body has already had many decades of wear and tear, and then you're putting a new type of exercise, a new type of activity on it. And I think it can be very difficult to adjust to having to accept where your body is at any given moment, and that your body can't always bite off as much as your brain wants to chew, right? The body can't always do. I mean, I think with ballet, we always want more than we can do, no matter our age, no matter our level. We always have more to practice than what we can fit into a day. But I think it hits us especially more when we come to ballet later in life. What's been your experience with that? I know you're out right now. You're out from the studio right now, hopefully back very, very soon. What do you how do you cope with that? How do you work with your body and work with those ups and downs in and out of the studio?
Yeah, this is a really important piece that I think many people can probably relate to is challenges of the body, right? So I remember in 2010, I had to have a shoulder surgery for a torn rotator cuff. And, so I was out of yoga for a little bit. And when I came back, things were just never quite the same. Like I've never had the strength I used to have. And, so my joints, I'm hypermobile, which probably many people who enjoy ballet might have that also. And so what that means is it's very flexible, but there's not enough strength.
Yeah.
And so that's resulted in hips and shoulders challenges. And so after Lilac Fairy, I had a hip replacement, actually just like a few weeks later, I think.
It was right after.
And it was right after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked it until I couldn't work anymore. I remember even before surgery, like it's a Friday morning, I had a private session with Sean Thursday
Oh,
night. I'm like, one more go.
you're so funny. Glutton, I think, is the word
A glutton.
at this point.
At that point. And I take a lot of anti-inflammatories. But yeah, and so then after that, there's just been a few complications that are incredibly rare that have happened with that hip since the replacement. And so every time I have another surgery, which I've had a surgery after every performance, and not because of the performance, it's just I put it off until after the performance so I
Right.
can get through. But then there's a healing time, 6 to 12 weeks. And this time he's really trying to limit me from movement because of the last issue, and he wants it to just really, really heal. Again, really super rare stuff. But I think hip replacements for women in midlife are becoming, I don't know, I'm seeing many more people talking about it. It's
Yeah.
really common. And what it is just like, cartilage breakdown, right? Arthritis. And nobody really, I've asked my doctors what causes it. They're like, I don't know. So we'll do surgery on X and X date. It's like, we don't really know. There might be data out there, but so many people ask me, well, why do you need a hip replacement? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just in a lot of pain and it's bone on bone, but I don't know why it's bone on bone,
Right.
and I'm sure everyone's bodies are different, but just recognizing like how to take care of your compensations. And what I mean by that is if you are really flexible, and I really loved my yoga and went really deep with everything, particularly hip openers. It's like to recognize you got to balance that with strength. It's really important. Now I lift my 2 pound weights, Julie. I'm like working out,
You're going for
but
it.
I'm going for it. I'm going hard. But everyone, we have just different things with our bodies, and just how to pay attention to those and let them rest, which is very hard for me. Julie, the day after surgery, I had my little cane and I was just bored being in bed. It's like I'd been in bed that whole day after surgery and then half of the next day. And I'm just like running, okay, walking slowly with my cane, my little pink cane around the living room in circles. And Tim is like, what are you doing? Go rest. You're supposed to rest. I'm like, I can't rest. So it's just funny how like our personalities, are part of all of this. Yeah, I think that I can't rest is probably what has led to a lot of these breakdowns.
And also the love of ballet, I think,
Yes.
in some ways, because ballet is an oddly restful experience for people who can't rest. If that, at least I think ballet
Yes.
is oddly restful because it causes your brain to actually kind of rest in a sense, especially if you are in a positive environment, you can focus on everything and just be in that one moment without being anywhere else or without so much, other thought and thinking. I think it's very relaxing for us who can't stop moving because it forces you to focus your mind, which is probably the real issue.
Yes.
It's probably not the body, it's probably the mind, if we're being honest. Um,
Yes.
yeah, you're very positive right now about the whole experience with the hip. I think this can be a really tough, a really tough thing for people to have to be, off their feet or have to go through these different types of things. What do you say to someone who's in that situation? Like, oh, I'm going to lose everything I worked for. I'm going to lose all my progress. It's all going to be gone. Like that sort of fear of loss and falling behind and those types of thoughts that can come up when you're, on the sidelines for a little bit, letting your body heal and letting it rest. I think those are the things that keep us from resting.
Well, that is really interesting because for me, like ballet and baths are two of my biggest form of therapy, and
Mm,
you can't have either, right, after a surgery. But
yeah.
I was just approved for baths, and let me tell you, I'm taking one every day now, um, which is it's so helpful. But when you are sidelined, I do have to say one positive part of it is I have so much more time in my day,
Oh my
you
gosh.
know, just like crazy. And, and two, it's not in the back of my mind, you should be practicing, you should be practicing. I
Yeah.
really felt like a big relief, even though I loved IABF. I always do. But once it's over, which I'm sure you feel this too, even though you're tying up all the admin stuff in the back end, but it's just like, like I don't have to hold on to that anymore.
Right.
And then, I had just a week that I could do ballet before my surgery, and I did it. I did it with you the day before my surgery.
Yeah.
And what I have found since this is my third go is, it is kind of like riding a bike. Yes, I've lost a lot of probably muscle and and those 2 pound weights only do so much. But it comes back. It is kind of like riding a bike.
Yeah.
You do have to build back up, but the time is like amazing because I don't know, I must devote 10, 12 hours a week to ballet, right? So that's a lot of found time and mental space when you're not rehearsing for anything.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a very, very important point. It does come back. It really does. It really does.
Yeah.
People, it's hard to believe when you're in that trough and when you're in that difficult place. And when you come back, it will be probably slower for the first little bit while you ease back in and all of that. But like really, it does come back. And even sometimes decades later, it comes back. Like ballet, when it's in your body,
Yeah.
like it's in your body and it's kind of amazing how your body works. It's kind of amazing. I don't think we actually really understand how this memory works, but when it's in there, it's just like your body knows. It's like you were saying about the people who can pick up choreography quickly. It's because it's in there already. It's because
Right.
it's been lodged in there. And no matter how much break they take, that skill is in there. Maybe the strength can go and the flexibility can go, but the skill and the coordination like does not go.
It might just go down a little, but it'll come back up. It
Right.
will.
Right. It's magic. Like the body
It
is kind
is.
of magical, honestly.
Well, but too, I mean, to that point, there is adjusting to maybe a new hip, right?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
to a hip that's tighter after surgery, things like that. So it's an adjustment. So it's almost like a getting to know your body again in a different way, but it works. It does work, it's just a little break.
Yeah, a little break. And I think when you're coming to ballet, a lot of people are getting to know their body for the first time in many, many years. It's a normal
Yes.
experience.
And they're left and right.
Yes. I have a lot of theories about body dyslexia, which is what I call this. I don't know if that's the actual name for it, but I have a lot of theories about body dyslexia. I see it quite regularly because the people who come to me to practice are usually the people who are having trouble with the studio environment and where that's too fast. Like if you can pick up in there and you can go really fast, sometimes how slow I go is kind of boring. And so those people, you don't find those people. So I spend a lot of time with people who have what I call body dyslexia. I don't think that's the actual name. I don't know if it's a clinical thing or not. I don't know. I'm not a clinical researcher here, but the left and right the left and right mix up is a real interesting, very interesting challenge. Usually people who have this either have left right dyslexia or up down dyslexia, where they can't understand the word bend and straighten their leg. Like there's a two types of this coordination challenge, like left and right get mixed up, or they can't do bend and straighten, which is a really interesting one. Like if you say bend your leg, they can't respond to that phrase. That does nothing for their body. The same way that when you tell somebody left foot who has this, it does not do anything. It doesn't trigger a response in the body.
That's so interesting, Julie. I wish I would have known this all these years of teaching yoga. I was like, left, your left, the left. It's like,
I mean,
but this, making an L with the
yeah,
left. It's like this is how I try to help people figure out, what the
yeah.
left is. But that's so interesting that there's a dyslexia around it.
I
Makes
don't
it
know
makes
if I don't
sense.
know if it's a real thing. I've possibly made it up, but I see it often enough that it's got to be a real thing. I
Yeah.
see it often enough, and it's got to be, yeah, um, a real thing. So maybe someone who's listening knows about this actually
Right.
clinical thing and will email me,
Yes.
tell me, and point me in the right direction for information on this. Um, but I find for people like that with body dyslexia, either up, down, or left, right, I don't find that people usually have both. Usually it's either up, down, or it's left, right.
Hmm.
I don't find that usually people have both. Actually, I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever met someone with both. That would be really tough. It because either direction is very important and difficult to get. I find that it's more of a feeling like than a word. So to feeling on the weak leg or feeling on the easier leg, like that you could, when you're thinking about left and right, it's more of how that side feels to your body and less about um, the which leg it is. Like going towards the less easy side or the difficult side or whatever it is. I find that works better. Or people who are down up, I think heavy or think light. They can think, pretend like you're a giant, pretend like you're a fairy. Like they can think in a visual, but not so much in the word down or up, which doesn't do anything to them. So I don't know, Kimberly, maybe it's a real thing,
Yeah.
but I see a lot of people with this left, right, or up, down. You don't have both, Kimberly, only left, right. You don't have up, down problem. You're beautifully graceful up, down. You don't have that thing going on. It's a real thing that I see on a very regular, like, I
Yeah.
mean, I meet a lot of people over the years with it.
Totally. Totally. No, that's so interesting. Yeah, and I know left right, but it's when
Yeah,
people say like to the wall. Well, then I have to really think, well, which one's facing the wall? So it is
right,
interesting how we're so different, but what you're saying makes sense because I know sometimes it'd be like bend your knee and then they'd straighten it more, right? And you're like,
right.
no, bend. But I think what happens is you kind of like me saying across the floor and forgetting the rest of the combination, you kind of panic. You're like, they're focused on me. They're telling me to do something. Let me do what I'm doing more, but it's not the right thing, you
Yeah,
know?
yes. And I found it, I mean, again, this is not clinical. This is not clinical information. We'll wrap up here. Well, this is not clinical information. So I don't know if this is psychological, but I find that it happens a lot in people who had like a very harsh teacher as a kid who was yelling at them or making them speak in front of the class or do something that caused them a lot of that panic when then they get this sort of like they have this sort of like ingrained panic moment which causes them to disassociate from
Yes.
their body and then they totally disconnected and they forgot what left was and they don't remember about their knees and they don't remember about their legs. And I find it very common with people who had some other type of learning challenge and were put in a very embarrassing position in their young ages and then they have this sort of, I don't know, dissociation from their body. I don't know. Anyways, I get
Yeah.
I'm very curious about these things because I want to help people learn how to dance. So I try to figure all the time like why are they having like what's going on here with this problem. But anyways, that's my that's my diatribe about body dyslexia. We thank you so much, Kimberly, for being here. I think you're a real testament to starting ballet, to keeping it in your heart for so long, and then to finally putting your whole heart into it. You're really just a beautiful story of how ballet can be such a big and meaningful part of your life. Do you have anything you want to leave the listeners with who might be, maybe this is like about to push them over the edge to hop into the studio and give it a try, that you might want to offer?
Well, first, I would say definitely do it. And if you are challenged in these ways, which we're all challenged in some way, definitely seek out a private lesson or two, not to be the
Mm,
private lesson pusher, but
totally.
it makes a massive difference to have somebody look at you and be like, oh, this is what's happening, or try this way, or let's explore it, which you can't really do the same in a group class. And to also try live classes. And when I say live, I don't mean in real life and, but I mean just like with a group, which I don't pay attention to the group. I only have Julie shown, I just pin her as I'm doing my online ballet class, but it really is, it's helpful, okay, at noon on Tuesday or noon on Thursday, I'm showing up. That's my ballet time.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a really big difference to feel it's the accountability buddy almost like you're my accountability buddy and the rest of the people in the class. So there's something to that. So, if you can, don't keep yourself hidden behind with videos even though videos are great, they're a great resource, but get yourself into a class, and know that people aren't watching you. There's this thing called spotlight syndrome where you think everyone's looking at us and we'll be too embarrassed. There's spotlight syndrome as people are only focused on themselves. So don't worry, and just pin Julie, pin the teacher, and just have a great time. Let it be fun. Really, it is joyful and it's incredibly challenging. And so that blend, I think, makes it really a delight.
I love it, Kimberly. Come and dance. It'll be a really great time. And the ballet world's waiting for you. It's going to be really fun over here.
Yes, yes.
Thanks again, Kimberly. Such a fun time to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you had a great time with that episode. Kimberly is such a delight, and if you'd like to keep in touch with Kimberly, listen to her podcast and enjoy all of the beautiful things she has to offer, I have all of the links to Tranquility du Jour in the show notes below. If you feel inspired to join us at the International Adult Ballet Festival, Kimberly and I would love to see you there. The website is iabf.dance. I'll be back in your ears next week with another amazing episode, but until then, I wish you very happy dancing.